Have I found the gateway to stillness, Master? Sonam, mind is the Buddha, while the cessation of conceptual thought is the way. Once you stop arousing concepts and thinking in terms of existence and non-existence, long and short, other and self, active and passive, you will find your mind is intrinsically the Buddha, that the Buddha is intrinsically mind. Therefore it is written that the true Dharmakaya resembles a void. Seek for naught besides this, else your search must end in sorrow, Sonam. I have tried to be a good student, Master. I have completed the 9 fundamental practices of Bon. Enlightenment springs from the mind regardless of your practice, Sonam. All practices are merely expedients for handling concrete matters when dealing with the problems of daily life. Even enlightenment, the Absolute, the Dharmakaya, and all the others down to the 10 stages of progress, the 4 rewards of virtuous and wise living, are every one of them mere concepts for helping us through samsara. They have nothing to do with the real Buddha mind. All the Buddha's teachings just had this single object, to carry us beyond the stage of thought. Now, if I accomplish cessation of my thinking, what use to me the Dharmas Buddha taught? Then how will I find the gateway to stillness, Master, if not through the Buddha's teachings? When speech is silenced, all movement stilled, every sight and sound vanished, then is the Buddha's work of deliverance truly going forward. Hills are hills, water is water, monks are monks, laymen are laymen. But these mountains, these rivers, the whole world itself, together with sun, moon and stars, not one of them exists outside your mind. The vast chiliocosm exists only within you. Outside mind, there is nothing. For 30 years Sonam wandered in samsara, and he forgot how to listen to his master's voice. Then one day he met a child, and his wounded heart began to heal. And through her he would come to understand that there is nothing to understand, and everything is the Buddha. Even as a small infant, little Kipu had been able to smile with her whole being, and when she laughed, it was with an uncontained joy that touched all within her spear. Sonam looked at the smiling infant's face, and he immediately saw a little Buddha. In that moment, and with the merest twinkling of a child's eyes, his many attachments began to break. And after years of effort, Sonam finally tamed his moving mind, albeit briefly. In his imagination, a beautiful rainbow appeared in the sky, shining vibrantly over a land of sparkling water and great green rolling hills. And his inner Lama spoke to him, as he had always done since the day he was born.
This little Buddha has given you the gift of unconditional love, Sonam. Her love is free from the poisons and concepts of conditioned mind, and maybe now the wounds of your heart can heal. Our first thoughts are only of the now we inhabit. Past and future hold no meaning for us, and the clear and pristine nature of consciousness is as yet untainted by the trials and sufferings of life.
The summer was slowly turning to autumn, and soon there would be fewer days on which to enjoy the park and the many delights of the pilot ship. Sonam was sitting with Kipu, watching the clouds dance in the sky. He knew that at this moment Her pristine mind was like a clear blue sky, free from all attachments. But soon her mind would begin to form its own desires. She would forget the little Buddha in herself, and would come to know suffering as well as joy. For most of us, that is how it has to be. And we spend our empty lives as flightless angels, crippled by our own frozen hearts and broken dreams. One day, when they were in the old park feeding the swans, Kipu asked Sonam about love. Love can be many things, Kipu. It can be the spring and summer of our life, or it can be the cruel obsession that drives us to despair. And then there is being in love. That can be very pleasant for a while. Of all of these, only unconditional love lasts, for it is free from the attachments of our hearts.
Everything changes, little Buddha. Already your beautiful, pristine mind is being conditioned by samsara. Always remember, even the noblest concepts of being human are in the end only chains to bind us to illusions and a lifetime of needless suffering. There is a balance in all things, little one. Everything we are and everything we see is just a construct of our conditioned mind. Without our thoughts, that old gnarled tree is not a tree, and these dull stones are as precious as glittering gems.
With few thoughts to trouble him, his mind wandered among the memories of his own childhood. His attention drifted there, caught by a kaleidoscope of ever-shifting images, until he was startled back to the present by the berries of the old rowan tree. For Sonam, the bright red berries of the autumnal tree had come to mark the passing of the seasons. He was 50 now, and the pace of those years seemed to be quickening. And for the first time, Sonam realised what it meant to face up to old age, and the inevitable decline of the physical shell. Time is still an endless expanse to you, little Kipu, he thought, as it was for me once. Then Sonam remembered a time when he was just a child, and the story his mother told him about the witch of the green hedge and her lost love. That story had been lost to his mother's memory, and now he was trying to recreate it from fragments. Perhaps he would write it for Kipu.
I got nail polish.
You got nail polish on? What colour is your nail polish?
I don't know.
Tell me, Kipu, what do you know about witches?
Witches can fly where they want to go every day.
Uh-huh. What do they look like?
They look like scary witches with a scary hat and some scary clothes.
Uh-huh. And what colour are their teeth?
White.
White. And their eyes? What colour are their eyes?
They are black.
Black eyes.
And they can shine in the night, and then they can look for something where they can look.
Uh-huh. And if I've told you I'm writing a story about the witch of the green hedge, what do you think the story should be about?
The things would scare and she'll jump up.
Uh-huh. Do you think witches are good people or bad people?
Bad people.
One day, when Kipu had just turned 3, Sonam decided he would give little Kipu a great treasure on her 9th birthday. There would be 9 birthday treasures, Sonam decided. And the first one would be a story that one day the little Buddha would read. When she did, maybe she would remember playing with her bath buddies and be able to see that a tree is not really a tree, and that all matter is fundamentally nothing more than light and space dust. Everything in the universe is connected, and no part of it, even the most fleeting thought, can exist independently of the whole. Of course, it would be many years before Kipu would read the story, and by then her conditioned mind would be fully formed. But Sonam hoped his story would be like a hidden terma, and help her to remember the little Buddha she once was, and would always be.
Think about your name once in a while, little Kipula. Who is that person? Think about them in every detail, what they believe in, what they stand for and hold dear. What are their innermost dreams, and what do they fear most? Then think, am I that person? Am I real? Who was I before I knew my name? Am I nothing more than an idle thought? Where does that thought come from? And where does it go? If you are mindful of these questions once in a while, you'll be amazed how your answers change over the years.
The years seem to fly by when you pass over the watershed of 50. And in no time little Kipu was 7. Sonam still hadn't found his story about the witch of the green hedge and her lost love. And Kipu was now of an age when she would begin to lose her childhood wonderment of life. And too soon she would stop believing in fairies and witches. She would stop believing in Christmas. Tell me, Kipu Nima, what do you know about witches?
Witches sometimes turn you into frogs, toads, or spiders, and they also have a big cauldron.
That doesn't sound very good. You have to be very careful when going to visit this witch of the green hedge then.
Yes. Some warts and a big nose.
Yeah.
A black cat.
A black cat. You know that witches don't like water?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they melt. They're like, ah!
That's right, they melt in the water.
Remember the other witch? She got killed by Dorothy's house.
You see, in our minds there is no difference between the real and the imagined world, Kipu. They begin in the same place and the same thing perceives them both.
Witches sometimes turn you into frogs, toads, or spiders.
Die Hexe der grünen Hecke.
Would you like to hear a story? A story about a real witch? This is the story of the witch of the green hedge and her lost love. Once upon a time, there was an old witch who lived by a green hedge close to the spring of a great river. It was said that the hedge was enchanted and located in a cold northern land beyond the ancient jewelled mountain of Aljugan, the legendary home of the water dragons. Now many of the people who lived within sight of the sacred mountain believed that the witch's spring was in fact a wishing well, and that the old crone was greedily guarding it to keep all its treasures to herself. Trouble was, most of the people in the old world were scared of dragons and witches, so they didn't bother to try and find the witch of the green hedge to hear her side of the story.
Elid hadn't always been a witch, but the trials and sufferings of her life had gnarled her face with cares, and her wounded heart could no longer light the world with love as it had in her youth. Of course, she could drink again from the sacred well, and an illusion of youth would be restored to her at once. After over 300 years, she was tired of living with her memories of the love she had lost, and the dark deeds that she regretted the most when those cold northern winds howled through her hawthorn hedge in the deep
that is a round tree, Kipu. Here in Scotland, people used to believe they had the power to ward off witches and warlocks. But you can also use them to travel between this world and the old world of the fairies. Now, Kipu, can you see the window of blue light where the bark of the tree twists around itself? That's a funny kind of window. I have windows in my house with Mummy and Daddy, but they don't look like that, said Kipu. That's because you're looking at a fairy window. Do you still believe in magic, Kipu? Now concentrate on that opening and let your thoughts pass through it and into the blue beyond. You see, in our minds, Kipu, there is no difference between the real and the imagined world. They both begin in the same place, and the same thing perceives them both. Through our consciousness, we are connected to everything and everyone that is or ever will be.
Silence sat between them, and slowly all their thoughts dissolved into the dance of blue light, between and beyond the gnarled branches of the old rowan, and soon they were flying across the still waters of a little green lochen, and then over the verdant rolling hills and lush valley pastures. Eventually they landed in a glade of silver birches close to a beautiful white coral beach surrounded by towering mountains. They sat down on a carpet of the greenest moss, speckled by glittering gemstones. A gentle breeze blew the music of songbirds to them, and their minds drifted with the nature spirits. They listened to the wind rustling in the trees, the spring song of the old forest, and the howling of the wolves. Little did they know it, but at that very moment a witch was closely observing them, and not just any witch, the very one they had come to find.
Where are we, Sonam? Kipu asked. We are in the old world of the fairies, Kipu. We came through a Sheehan portal. Now, there are a few things I need to tell you about the witch of the green hedge before we meet her. Firstly, she used to be called Elide, and she can be a bit on the grumpy side. Oh, and for every 24 hours we spend here, only an hour passes in the new world, so you won't be late home for tea. Is she really ugly? Asked Kipu. She has green skin and warts and a huge nose. But once upon a time, Elide was the most beautiful woman in this land, and she was destined to marry her prince. Are you ready to meet her now, Kipu? I think so.
Good evening, little Kipu Nima. Aren't you afraid to be out in these dark woods looking for a wicked witch and plotting to steal from her? Fear not, I mean you no harm, and I will not stop you drinking the waters from my sacred wishing well. But know this, child, the waters are cursed. You should also be forewarned that only two lovers can drink from the well and gain its blessing of eternal youth and good fortune.
How come you're old and ugly and all alone then? Asked Kipu.
The fairy charm grows weaker should you fail to drink from the well regularly. And if you choose to stop drinking entirely, then you slowly turn into an old hag with a body covered in warts and ears and eyes as sharp as a wolf. you become a despised creature of the shadows, cursed by circumstance, hated and feared by all whom cross you.
Is that why you're alone, Elliot?
My last and dearest love betrayed me and abandoned me here in this cursed fairyland 300 years ago. For all of those weary, lonely years I have waited for him to return to my side, or for two true loves to drink from my wishing well and release me.
Do you still have your book of fairy tales, Elliot?
I burnt that book a long time ago, old man, and I've tarried here with you long enough. Seek my sacred wishing well at your peril, child.
Punima! Kipu Nima! Wake up! Wake up! It's time to go home for your tea. I was dreaming about the witch of the green hedge, Sonam. Are you quite sure it was a dream, Kipu?
Die Hexe der grünen Hecke.
For those who pause to look with imagination, there are faces in the ancient trees and rocks, watching over fairy circles and secret places of power. The little Buddha looked at him with her deep blue eyes and smiled, with all the love and compassion of Chama, the mother of loving wisdom, or so it seemed to Sonam. Then Kipu glanced towards the wishing well, and just for the briefest of moments she almost looked sad. When Sonam thought she might well burst into tears, she laughed with all the joy in her little heart and said, "I want ice cream. Ice cream is just so yummy." They ate their ice creams by the wooden pig under the old rowan tree, and soon it was time to say goodbye to the old park and go and find Mummy. It would be 30 years before Sonam saw Kipu again, if he remained in this time, and if he decided to drink from the wishing well again, then 333 years would have to pass. Would she still be a broken angel? As Sonam looked across the river to the last of the shipyards, a sense of loss and regret filled him, and he thought of Kipu and Elliot, the witch of the green hedge. Would his fairy story make a difference this time? Would she learn to fly? Then Sonam turned away from the great river, and he walked alone towards the northern sky and an uncertain future. But he had no complaints. This was the path he had chosen.
Could hold you when there were no bars that could hold you, could hold you. Why'd it take so long for my imagination to fly? Why'd it take so long for my imagination to die? Somewhere in my mind you smile, still smile. Somewhere in my mind you smile, still smile.